Good afternoon. Good afternoon. As you may have heard, I am privileged to be the Chief Operating Officer for the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I am honored to be with some amazing panelists, and in a moment you'll hear a little bit about them. They'll introduce themselves and a little more, and we're going to have a great session in terms of talking about what sports and entertainment and its impact, not only in Miami and Florida, but globally. The Greater Miami, it's very appropriate that we're following the prior session that talked about cruises. As you probably know, Greater Miami is the cruise capital of the world. We've been making some massive investments in our ports. We're blessed to have so many cruise lines and so many great leaders in our community, including Heidi Webb, the port director. But tourism, as probably is the foundation of our economy here in Miami-Dade County. And it permeates every nook and cranny. It's the foundation upon what every other industry is built on. Obviously, we're here in the amazing Grand Dame of hotels, the Biltmore. I wanted to thank Gene and Tom Prescott. They've been amazing hosts of this event for many years. And it's not just about hotels. It's about our restaurants. It's about our nightlife. It's about our arts and culture. Tourism has fueled much of the success of what's happened in Greater Miami and Miami Beach over the years. I've been here, living here my whole life. I moved down here from Norfolk, Virginia when I was a very small child, and I've been here ever since. And I've seen that evolution of Miami, that transformation, that revolution of Miami, large part fueled by our tourism success, which, by the way, wasn't always the case. So, back in the late 80s and the 90s, tourism was kind of in the doldrums, and there was a lot of catalysts to our success. And one of those catalysts was obviously the advent of the preservation movement, the Art Deco hotels along Ocean Drive. That was definitely one of the catalysts to turn things around, and we've benefited ever since. Believe it or not, another catalyst was Miami Vice. And I'm sure you won't admit to it, but Miami Vice kind of made us cooler than we really were. We weren't that cool, we weren't that hip, but in that case, life imitated art, and we kind of grew into that sexy image, and that was amazing. Now, the other thing in the 80s, and this is a personal moment for me, was one of my most iconic sporting moments, and I'm going to ask our panelists when they introduce themselves to not only talk about themselves and, of course, their organization, but what was one of those quintessential sporting moments, whether it was an event, whether it was a celebrity that they may have come across. But for me, and again, I'm a big football fan, growing up in Miami, University of Miami. I'm sure there's perhaps a couple of Canes in the room. It was technically it was 1984, but it was the 1983 season when the then number 8 University of Miami Hurricanes went up against undefeated Nebraska Cornhuskers in the Orange Bowl, which is one of the venues that no longer exists. And we'll talk a little bit about football stadiums in a moment. And it was the upset of the century. That was when University of Miami football kind of arrived, and everyone rushed the field, and it was a very special moment. And sports has that power. Sports has the power to drive economic development. It has the power to unify communities. And in fact, it has the power to unify the world. So we at the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau, we about 11 years ago, recognizing the power of sports, we actually absorbed the Miami-Dade County Sports Commission. So when you go around the country, typically you'll find a tourism office and you'll typically find a sports commission, where we have one under the same roof. We have our tourism office and our sports office. And in fact, our sports and entertainment director, that's Matt Radner, and I wanted to give him a shout out. So he's been working feverishly, including with some of these folks on the panel, about attracting world-class global sports, not just because they generate a lot of pretty media impressions and fill hotel rooms, because they drive economic development. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and about venues and about great partners. But I'm going to start at the far end, because I talked about football in 1983, and that was at the old Orange Bowl football stadium. And someone had a vision at that time who no longer is around us, and they made a private investment to build an amazing football stadium in the northern part of our county. And we're blessed to have someone that's going to talk a little bit about that and so much more. But with that, let him introduce himself at the far end of our seats here.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Myles Pistorius. I'm the Senior Vice President and General Counsel of the Miami Dolphins, Hard Rock Stadium, and the Formula One Miami Grand Prix. We measure our service at the Dolphins in terms of seasons. I'm in my 9th season here at the Dolphins. Prior to moving down to South Florida, I was living up in the New York, New Jersey area. I worked in the NBA league office for 15 years, where I was in a legal department and supported the events work that we did around the world at the NBA. So I've been able to experience events and their economic impact from both the governing body side, which is the NBA, and now as a part of a host city and a host community as the council for the Hard Rock Stadium, where a lot of the events we're going to talk about take place.
Great. So from the northern part of Miami-Dade County, we're going to go all the way down south in the Homestead area. For those of you that may not be familiar, about 30, 40 minutes without traffic. Al, is that correct? And we're blessed to have the president of the Homestead Speedway here. And not coincidentally, there's that connection with Hard Rock Stadium and this venue. They're both home to many amazing events, including racing. So, Al?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for having me and to be able to talk to you fine folks. We opened Homestead-Miami Speedway in 1995. I was born and raised in Miami, lived pretty much all over the world, but where I caught the fever and got involved in motor racing was as a youth. I lived in Europe, in Spain in particular, and in Europe at that time in the 70s, there was two things to do. It was soccer and motorsports, and a guy like me can't really run, so soccer's not in the cards, so gravitated towards motor racing. But you touched on the Miami Vice and how that was a bit of a renaissance, and I had the good fortune to work for a visionary, a guy named Ralph Sanchez, and he saw you remember the magazine cover that was, I think it's Time magazine, had Miami, and it was Paradise Lost, and downtown Miami, was desolate. And one of Ralph's visions was to bring Monaco to downtown Miami to help renovate and help stimulate the economy. And so we started the Grand Prix of Miami in 1983. As a matter of fact, they filmed an episode of Miami Vice at the Grand Prix one year. But as we saw that it worked so well and Miami became cool and the development was rampant, we knew that we had to find a permanent home for the sports car races and IndyCar races we were doing at the time. And so that's what Homestead-Miami Speedway was born from.
That's amazing. Again, growing up in Miami, I remember that Grand Prix in downtown. Candidly, it was our only marquee event. And if you look at that opening sequence of Miami Vice, you'll see it, besides the flamingos fluttering around, I think there's a sequence from the race in downtown Miami. So from North Dade to South Dade, I'm going to skip over our esteemed guest that flew in at 1 o'clock this morning because I'm going to close these intro sessions with her, with Angela from the Florida Sports Foundation. But this gentleman to my left, again, a dear friend, and they all are, he has his own little race. It's just not powered by internal combustion engines, but it's powered by the power of the human. The Miami Marathon is an amazing event that's been happening in our community, and Frankie has been the driving force of that amazing event that showcases the heart and soul of downtown Miami, Miami Beach. So Frankie, a little introduction there.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Rolando. I got to thank Rolando because he's been with us every step of the way since 2003 when we started what is now known as the Lifetime Miami Marathon. We started with 3,400 runners back then, and now it's a sold-out event with upwards of 18,000 runners showing up at the end of January every year. I'm a lifelong Miamian. I love all things Miami. I'm involved in the running ecosystem down here at all different levels. I'm also a high school running coach, which is probably the thing I enjoy the most. But I'm really glad I'm sitting next to Rolando up here because way back when we thought of the Miami Marathon being on par with some of the other great marathons in the world. And those of you that stay in the loop with things, the New York Marathon was a couple days ago, and I'd like to say that Miami is on track to follow in the footsteps of such great events such as that, and London and so many others. So thank you, Rolando, for helping us get there.
Yeah, I remember as it was yesterday, that press conference at what is now known as the Casella Center, when we announced that race, and Frankie has been there day one. By the way, he's also being quite humble. At one point, he had a title as the Chief Running Officer for the city of Miami. And more recently, he has had a streak of amazing success as a high school cross-country coach. I believe his team is ranked number 4 in the country. So congratulations to Frankie. It's been amazing. And I know a lot of you know him out there. So, well, let me close out this initial round with another esteemed guest. And literally she got in this morning, right? But a lot of the events that you're going to hear about, including the events that we're talking about represented on this stage, could not be possible without the support of an amazing organization that provides support to so many, because they get what the power of sports is on many, many levels. So with that, let me let Angela Suggs introduce herself.
Thank you, Rolando. And welcome to Florida for those of you that have come in as I have. But I actually live here, and I'm so honored to serve in this role, heading up our support of Greater Miami CVB and its efforts through sport with Matt Ratner and Amanda Ford and that wonderful team. We have 34 other partners throughout the state. And so through 35 communities, we support a $70+ billion economic impact through sport, and that's amateur, professional, recreational, leisure sports all throughout our state. We travel the globe to let people know that Florida is where the world comes to play. Of course, everything from Super Bowls and All-Star games, FIFA World Cup, cheer and dance, pickleball, you name it. Florida has something for everyone. I got my start in sports at what was then Joe Robbie Stadium, and was there through the transition into Pro Player Stadium. And we thought that it was a great idea to renew 10 years later, and was a part of that renewal team where we were inviting baseball into license suite holders and license agreement holders, where we were going to, sell them on the fact that baseball was a great idea here in South Florida as well. Then, of course, with the Florida Panthers, we were able to be a part of a Stanley Cup and a World Series very early on in those franchises coming to our community. Fast forward some 20+ years later, and I now get to serve in this role in partnership with many of our local organizing committees for the major events that come, as well as our annual events, our races that we hold, and many, many of those partners. The biggest thing about this is in the early 90s, Florida was the first state in the union to see a benefit in creating an organization like the Florida Sports Foundation, and that we would then find ways to then create revenues. For us, it's a specialty license plate program that each person that registers a vehicle in the state of Florida has the opportunity to support their favorite professional sports team, to support NASCAR, to look at tennis, as well as an Olympic plate that we have. And so they get to choose that. Now, mind you, that may sound like, okay, that's fine, but they choose between that and 125 other plates. But we've been able, over the past now almost 30 years, to be able to raise into the millions to then pour directly back into these communities for these events in partnership with Greater Miami Sports and many of our other communities. And so that's where we are. And so I'm super honored to serve in this role and to be on this panel.
Thank you. And please get your sports specialty license plate. It helps raise money. By the way, not just to fund a lot of these mega events. Angela mentioned volleyball, softball, amateur sports, and the numbers of people, and I'm sure there's a lot of parents that have attended lots of events over the years, myself included, that has a tremendous, tremendous economic impact, and it fills a lot of room nights. So there's one event in particular that we have to talk about it, right? Because everyone else is talking about it, and we're so blessed. We're one of 16 cities that will be hosting a little event in summer of 26. Does anybody know what that event is? It's a World Cup soccer. So that little event that little event's going to roll into town in 2026. That process started in 2017, led by Matt Radner, working with Myles and many other folks in putting together a bid to submit to FIFA. And it's been quite a journey, quite a very competitive process. And when they made the announcement that Miami was going to be hosting that, we said, oh my God, now what do we do? Because it is the largest sports undertaking that, you know, we will ever have that we've had in Miami-Dade County. I know we've hosted 11 Super Bowls, record number, many college football championships. But those would pale in comparison to we expect in June of 2026. No less than 6, probably 7 or 8 games over a month and a half, multiple fan fests. So it is going to be a massive, massive event, and we couldn't have done it with the support of many people, including our county, our cities. But it all starts with the investments that Hard Rock Stadium and its ownership, and Myles has been involved for quite some time, has made into that facility to not only make it a home for world-class soccer and, of course, American football, F1 racing now, the Miami Open, but a myriad of other events. So the products that are now being developed or showcased at Hard Rock Stadium is truly, truly unique and something that did not exist not too long ago. So I'd love for Myles to talk about that product mix and how it's allowed us to showcase more of those amazing events and offerings to a myriad of different types of customers.
Yeah, sure. You know, when I started in June of 2015, they had just started ripping out the old orange seats at the stadium. The stadium was 30 years old at the time, and it just needed a refresh. So, you know, we thought about even tearing it down and building a new one, but we decided after talking to the engineers that it still had good bones, that we were just going to renovate it. So we spent $750 million renovating the stadium. Before that, in 2010, the last time we had a Super Bowl, the NFL said they weren't coming back to the stadium into Miami unless it was renovated. So I think that put the pressure on, and Stephen Ross had just bought the team, and he wanted to give South Florida the venue, the global entertainment destination that it deserves. So we spent about $750 million, and that led us to get a Super Bowl in 2017. We've since gotten a college football national championship. The Miami Open moved from Key Biscayne to Hard Rock Stadium, and if it wasn't for the Miami Open and that success, Formula One would have never decided to move the race to the stadium. I don't think they would have imagined what a great job we could do in a stadium parking lot. But when they saw how we converted it for tennis, they were convinced and trusted us to deliver a world-class event like all the other Grand Prix throughout the world. So, you know, at the time when we were building this stadium or renovating the stadium, we wanted some governmental subsidies. We came to the county and we said, hey, you know, when we bring these events, it has an economic impact for the entire county, for hotels, for car rentals, for restaurants. And that's, you know, we don't see that revenue, but it's there. Could you use some of that to help fund the stadium renovation? And at the time, there wasn't a lot of public will for that because they had just built a new baseball stadium, and I think the taxpayers didn't want to foot any more stadium bills. But I think to Mr. Ross's credit, and this is right before I got there, they struck a deal with the county that basically says if you renovate the stadium and you attract these major events, we will pay you some percentage or some part of the economic impact that these events draw. So Super Bowl is, you know, one amount, World Cup is another amount, College Football Championship is another amount, and there's these tiers of events. Those are all tier 1 events. And then we had since then we've added Formula One and the Miami Open as events where under this county marquee event grant agreement, they help, we get paid. So since 2016, we've been accruing all of these events, and actually starting at the end of this year, we will receive our first check from the county, and it's going to be a 30-year deal, and that did help subsidize, what we spent on, on renovating the stadium. And I also think, you know, to the county's credit, they knew that this impact was large and that we should be sharing in it, and that a privately held company, probably shouldn't have to foot that whole bill. So we're very grateful for that, and I think it's worked out for both sides.
Yeah, it's interesting because as many of you may know, hopefully, and I know we've got a lot of folks watching online, Hard Rock Stadium sits at practically the county line with Broward County to the north. So candidly, a lot of the great stuff that's happening there impacts and benefits Broward County. Palm Beach County has a regional impact. When we go after Super Bowls, for example, we put together hotel room blocks from all three counties. But the deal that Myles alluded to, I believe, is only with Miami-Dade County.
It is.
So perhaps Broward County owes us a check, right? Or owes you a check. That's a different panel. That's but I will say that facilities, tourists, when they come to our community, and thankfully several of you have tourists, tourists generate a lot of taxes, not just sales taxes, but a lot of tourist taxes. And Myles alluded to the convention development tax. There's a tourism development tax. There's a food and beverage tax. Bottom line is that tourists do give back a lot to this community, and going to what I said earlier, definitely are the driving force when it comes to economic impact. And while Hard Rock Stadium didn't get, I guess, on the front end, a lot of public support. On the back end, it's getting some of that support. And frankly, it's a small fraction based on the investment that ownership has put into that, which has tremendous impact. A different model was used in Homestead Speedway, if I'm not mistaken, Al, in terms of how the public-private partnership and some of the investments that were made for the county to get that facility built in South Dade. Talk a little bit about that. And also, being in South Dade and Homestead, and it's a speedway, they just celebrated, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the NASCAR playoff race, if I'm not mistaken. But there is activity happening at that racetrack a lot more often than people think. It doesn't just do the NASCAR and go dark. On the contrary. So, Al, a little bit about how that facility got built, and educate us all in terms of the 365 impact that Speedway has down in Homestead.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Rolando. So Homestead-Miami Speedway was born as a result of Hurricane Andrew. So in August 24th, 1992, Hurricane Andrew devastated the south part of Miami-Dade County, Homestead in particular. So the result was that the biggest economic driver in South Miami-Dade County was the Homestead Air Force Base. There was roughly 14,000 enlisted people and their families living in South Dade and working at the Air Force Base. The base was damaged so heavily that the Department of Defense, the feds, decided to downgrade it from an active Air Force base to an Air Reserve base. So that means instead of 13,000 jobs, it went to 800 jobs, 400 civilian jobs and 400 full-time reservists. So essentially, the Department of Defense took 30,000 people and moved them out of town overnight. And so they saw how that would devastate a community of, say, 60,000 residents, thinking half the population or more, and the others fled because of the extensive damage. So the federal government, the Department of Defense, gave the city of Homestead a grant to build themselves an economic generator. And so at the time, we were promoting big-time auto racing in downtown Miami, and there was IndyCar races at Tamiami Park as well. But we knew that for auto racing to take hold in Miami-Dade County, we needed a facility that we could use year-round. And it was an opportunity to help the rebirth of South Dade, creating jobs, creating economic opportunities. And so that's how Homestead-Miami Speedway came to be. The company I work for, NASCAR, we have a management and operating agreement, but the city of Homestead owns the facility. And so we have a long-term management and operating agreement with the city, and we host races there. To your point, Rolando, we're busy. All 52 weekends of the year are booked. We operate about 300 days of the year with what we call a hot racetrack. And so our core competency, we're there for motor racing. So what does that mean? Now in the wintertime, there's awful lot of research and development. We're one of the few big speedways that's open in the wintertime. So as the IndyCar teams get ready to go for next season, and they're doing now, for example, IndyCar is going to hybrid motors, similar to what Formula One uses. So this week we'll have 5 IndyCar teams come from Indianapolis. Chevrolet and Honda will be there, testing out and practicing with the new motors. So a lot of film shoots that are automotive related commercials, a lot of car clubs, a lot of driving schools, and more than anything, a lot of research and development work goes in. But we have 600 acres. And Myles, as you can attest, these big venues eat capital. So just to keep the lights on, to maintain these facilities is extremely expensive. And that's on us, right? We pay rent to the city, but then all the expenses to upkeep, it falls on our privately held company. So we like to leverage the core. We do triathlons. We have a big triathlon in March. You know, Frankie and I are talking about doing more events, but we have Arts 305. So when Art Basel is in Miami Beach, some of the artists that get shut out, excuse me, we're trying to bring an art show to South Dade so they don't have to travel as far out to the beach to see some of these cultural events as well. So we do music, we do lifestyle events, and so that's how the Speedway came to be. We have a significant amount of economic impact because we're in use all year long, very similar to what Mr. Ross and your team is doing there at Hard Rock Stadium. And so we're very proud of that, and that's why we always like to say that we take our job as being corporate citizens very, very seriously, but it's also a great example of a public-private partnership. So the public built it, the Department of Defense funded it. The city has no expertise. They turned it over to us, and so the rest is history. We just hosted a NASCAR race October 22nd. It was the third to last race of the season. So I think 38% of the folks that attended that race were from out of state. So again, it drives an awful lot of economic opportunity. It creates an awful lot of jobs. You know, we employ almost 3,000 in food service and parking attendants and ushers, and examples where a lot of these folks that work events and off-duty police and fire, et cetera, could come out and have a little bit of opportunity to work.
Thank you, Al. By the way, speaking of hot track, the other thing that they do is charity. They do some charity work. So my son and I, and Al, I don't know if you still have that in place, I was able to drive on that track with my son. I've made a donation of $20 a lap, and I was able to cruise around at about 120 miles per hour on that amazing track. I don't know, Al, if you still do that, if that's even legal anymore, but it was I had the funnest time of my life getting on that track and zooming around with my son in his little two-door coupe.
No, absolutely. We do. It's we have a foundation, and we like to give back to the community. So that's a fundraiser for us. Give back at the track so people pay to drive their cars on the track, which
Wow.
It was restricted to 90 miles an hour, so 120. We're kind of looking the other way. But
Well, I broke the rules.
What really makes a lot of this possible is that oftentimes people tell me that we promote events where people come to vacation. We live and work where people like to come to vacation. So we work really hard at delivering an extraordinary guest experience. You know, we train the staff from the law enforcement folks maintaining traffic to the ushers to everybody that they're wanding or stubbing tickets. You know, yes, now what's your question? The kind of the Ritz-Carlton model, right? And so we try to differentiate ourselves by providing an extremely meaningful guest experience. And we know that when they come to sporting events, we're creating memories. It's not unusual to see 3 generations, and they can all remember and rally when they were there when Dan Marino threw 4 touchdown passes, or when Tony Stewart drove from the back to the front and won a championship. So we're creating memories, and that's why, whether it's youth sports, when you're watching your son, daughter, niece, nephew do something really incredible at a soccer or softball tournament or whatever it may be, you know, the marathon, how many families run together and finish together. And so when we're creating memories, that's a lifetime, and that's the bond, and then they'll continue to keep coming back to our community. You know, Homestead for years was known as the place where the Air Force Base was. But now when there's 31 countries that we sell tickets in, and there's beamed out over 70 countries over the world, in late October, the shots of people swimming in our lake in the infield while the race is going on, you can't buy that kind of publicity.
Yeah. In fact, when I was there, I was in the stands. I could see they have a beach in the infield of Homestead Speedway, and these are these images get broadcasted around the world. So I think I may have mentioned earlier, but it bears repeating. The events, the sporting entertainment events, are broadcast around the globe. You know, I'm in the business of selling Miami. They make my job, our job, easier because they're elevating that brand. I could never afford to purchase the media impressions, much less fill the hotel rooms as much as they do. So again, the power of sports and entertainment and its global impact. You know, both Myles and Al spoke about how there typically is some sort of investment by the municipalities, by the county, to ensure that those events have long-term success. And going back to Frankie and the Miami Marathon in 23 years, I'd like him to talk about, his race, I believe, touches at least 2 municipalities, at least 2. And for those of you that know the course, it goes from downtown Miami to Miami Beach to South Beach. It goes through Coconut Grove. And these are a lot of neighborhoods. It takes a lot of coordination, a lot of support from the municipalities, from the organizations. And I guess that's your version of the public-private partnership. But it's also about investing in our infrastructure so that when those runners from around the world are going through our community and those are being broadcast around the world, it's done so in a positive way that our image is being elevated. So Frankie, tell us about, the logistics of putting this multi-jurisdictional, multi-neighborhood colossus together.
Yeah, so we were talking about this earlier. I joked that when you're having a party at your house, you scramble and you try to get everything in order. My wife's screaming at me, cut the grass, do everything to make the house look as nice as it could possibly look. And I think these events force us to do that. It forces us to clean up our act a bit, look at some of our infrastructure, because those days we're basically highlighting the best that we have, and even the best we have, can use some polishing from time to time. So throughout the years, we've noticed, something as simple as the amount of litter that might be on our roadways, because now the runners are at ground level, running on our highways and our roads. So we've addressed that throughout the years. So it really has provided us an opportunity to engage our local officials, our community partners, the public works departments, and so forth to help us, ready the community for our events.
It's, as I said earlier, these events don't only have a Miami-Dade County impact, they impact South Florida, Broward County, obviously Palm Beach County, but they have tremendous impact for the state, Angela. And I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper in terms of how the state of Florida is well positioned, thankfully, because of your organization, and comparatively speaking, because we're competing against the country, against the Texas of the world, the Californias of the world. We always think, there is no place like Florida, and definitely no place like Miami-Dade County. But we also talk about not only the economic impact, but the jobs that it supports. So if possible, kind of give us a more broad statewide level in terms of the impact of sports, not just economically, perhaps the jobs that you see, and how we compare with some of these other big states across the country.
Certainly, and I think that one of the biggest things that I hope that you're hearing from all of the presenters today is a spirit of collaboration. Right, and that what it takes to run this race, not just run it, but to literally, from a production standpoint, and all of the entities that have to come together and get on the same page for the same outcome, for the same desire and priority of experience. Right, the same thing that happens with the city of Miami Gardens. So yes, we say the north part of the county, but that community, once known as Carroll City, and then they went through a whole name change, a whole rebrand in terms of their governmental structure, and then Mr. Ross comes in and totally revamps that landscape and that footprint. The same thing that we speak about post Hurricane Andrew and what happened there in the Homestead area. But in all of this, the government, the city, the county, everyone is working together with this. We're talking about close to 1 million jobs through amateur, professional, recreational, and leisure sport that supports that $70+ billion annual economic impact through all of these different lanes of sport, right? And so as I mentioned to you about the specialty plate program and what we do from a grant perspective, because then we work and offer grants through the permission of our franchise franchise owners, that we use the image and likeness, if you will, of the Miami Dolphins and of the Florida Panthers, the Miami Marlins, NASCAR. And what we then do is pour that back, not just into the communities for grants, but also into the youth programs that each of the organization's charities have. And so there's a legacy piece to that as well that comes through this. And again, one of the first, or the first in the country to come up with a model like this, the longest standing. There still isn't another state in the United States that does it quite like we do. Because again, we also are producing opportunities for our seniors to competitively compete throughout the year. We have senior games. And so something like a Senior Olympics that the Florida Sports Foundation is producing. Well, we're hosting these events in different venues that have been built and have multi-purpose opportunities associated with them. And so at our spring training, and so there's another state here in the country, Arizona out west, that has 15 teams. Well, guess where the other 15 teams come to do their spring training? Right here in the state of Florida through 13 communities. But outside of the spring training schedule and season, those facilities are used for youth sporting events. And so, again, could not be done without the collaboration, could not be done without, again, the fact that we've done this for a very long time. And 23 years, right? We're talking about what's been going on in terms of what Mr. Ross has been able to grow. That's because we're not just in and out. That these events and these organizations, these owners, this commitment is definitely deep rooted. We have spring training teams that have committed over 100 years to the state of Florida in terms of their training here. And so with that, that is what makes Florida a very, very special place. And that is why we've hosted more Super Bowls than any other state. Even because now Miami has hosted it more than any other community, but then you add Tampa, you add Jacksonville, and even Vegas wasn't good enough. Pro Bowl's coming back to Florida here for 2024.
All right. Thank you, Angela. In fact, Myles got in late yesterday. I think he was scouting out I don't want to call it the competition in Vegas. They're having their own little F1 race, but I think what's happening here in Hard Rock Stadium is pretty amazing. So, we've talked about all the positive things, and I don't think I actually choreographed this, but I want us to be candid. And what are some of the headwinds? I mean, so we've had tremendous success. And we have venues in North Dade, in South Dade, in Central Dade, and of course throughout the state of Florida. And from a tourism office's perspective, and I would dare say that this is part of the conversation, and as residents, and I'm a resident, how we get people around town, including to some of these amazing venues, the fans, the residents, is something that we definitely need to be mindful of. And we are now seeing, as we do our ongoing surveying of tourists that come from around the globe, traffic was way down there back in the day, but it's been creeping up. So it's a real thing. Quite frankly, the optimist in me would say it's great that we have traffic. It would be horrible if we didn't, but it's a reality. And it has the potential to impeding some of our success, especially we're trying to move massive amounts of people to Hard Rock Stadium, way at the north part of our county. And we're trying to move massive amounts of people down to South Dade, to Al's Place, and definitely within the heart of our city, which many years ago, not a lot of folks lived there. So the complaints that Frankie got were probably relatively nominal, and now it's sky high. So I am curious, any quick thoughts in terms of how the transportation issue and perhaps other headwinds, things that we should be mindful of and preparing for, working with our city and county leaders and amongst each other to ensure that we keep this amazing momentum of success going. So I'm going to stick to the same order. So I'm going to go to the northern part of our community. Myles, any quick thoughts on that?
Yes, transportation is definitely an issue. It would be great to see a northwest corridor line, train line from the beach and downtown to the stadium. That would help a lot. I think sustainability and resilience is really important. It's been a focus now that I'm on the bidding side of events. FIFA and F1, they have a big focus on sustainability and also giving back to the community. And to Angela's point, yes, everyone's coming to Miami to go to the beach or go out to the restaurants in Brickell, but it's really important to us at the stadium that we take care of our neighbors right next to us in Miami Gardens. We did a deal with them, with the city, who's been very supportive of us, where we create internships geared right towards Miami Gardens residents or people going to college in Miami Gardens. There's three schools there. And we also do a STEM program for middle school and high schoolers in Miami Gardens through F1 in schools, so they get to see the F1 technology up close and build their own mini F1 cars. We're also we do this restaurant program where local restaurants and food trucks can come on site and operate at Formula One and keep all the revenue because we want this rising tide to lift all boats. And I think that's one of the challenges with some of these events. Sometimes you forget about the people who are working and living through it and dealing with all the traffic. You need to make sure that that they also benefit from the events.
Yeah, these global events and again, a lot of those at Hard Rock Stadium and other places will typically have a legacy program, and it's about giving back to that local community. And it's not just because quite often there's a lot of inconvenience, and there truly is, but it's also because making sure that the impact, and by the way, F1, it's a technology event. It's a car race, but the technology that goes into those amazing machines can provide pathways for engineering and other types of degrees. Brightline, we all heard of it. It's finally rolling, and I think Brightline has the power to help us attract more visitors, from the Orlando, the Tri-County area. That Northwest 27th corridor, which is part of the SMART plan that our county has been debating for quite some time, seems like it's going to be fast-tracked to have at least an initial station up at the stadium from downtown Miami, and then add additional stadiums along that path. That would be hugely important. And then on the flip side, going down to South Dade, Al, I'm sure you've been hearing a little bit about the bus rapid transit system, and I'm curious, I know that's going to run along the corridor there. And again, curious how transportation figures into your planning, what opportunities, but quite frankly, what are the challenges to continue the success that you're seeing down in South Dade?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Rolando. Transportation is a big issue. To us, we work as hard on traffic and parking as anything we do, and that's because the fans, the guests that come to this mega events, when you have 100,000 people on a 600-acre campus, right? It's the first impression and the last impression. If they can get in comfortably, park, tailgate, and have a reasonable walk to the stadium, that's fine. If they can get out and clear the parking lots and be on their way home in a reasonable amount of time, the likelihood of them returning is tenfold, right? It could be the most exciting, the best event, the best experience they've ever witnessed, right? But if it takes them 3 or 4 hours to get out of a parking lot or get down the road, they're not going to come back. It was great, but I'm going to watch it on TV. So yes, we work with Brightline to bring our customers from Broward and Palm Beach County to downtown, and then connect them on the busway down to South Dade. So we're at a disadvantage because a lot of these tracks, the people arrive from all points of the compass, right? East, west, north, south. Everybody arrives southbound, and then everybody leaves after the race northbound. We have a few patrons that stay in the Keys, but not many. Almost everybody is heading north. So we're at a bit of a disadvantage there. So the more roadways, Frankie, to your point, to invest in infrastructure. The Turnpike went to 3 lanes. That helped tremendously. And we continue to improve the roadways. And of course, mass transit with Brightline and other means of transportation to get them down to South Dade is hugely important to us.
That's amazing. And Frankie, I know that your event, 23 years, has maximized that downtown South Beach. I know that you have an expo component that is part of his event. It's back at the convention center. So the Miami Beach Convention Center, which is in Miami Beach, as most of us would know, getting people from downtown Miami to Miami Beach to that convention center for his expo or anything else can be quite challenging at times, and I think there's been a lot of discussion about another extension of the Metro Rail, for example, to get folks over there. But give us your perspective on the transportation, how it impacts you, and perhaps is there any other major headwind that you see really as something that we should be mindful to continue the global impact of your event?
No, definitely have that issue with the amount of growth that there has been in downtown Miami. I used to only have to send out notification to one building with residents. Now we have about 50 buildings since we started that we have to notify. So. Just handling some of the residents' concerns with traffic that day just highlights how different we really are from, say, the New York City Marathon, where people can still move about their city if their roadways are impacted. So that certainly presents a problem. We've also experienced some problems with enough police officers for some of our events because there was somewhat of a significant shortage of off-duty police officers. So that's been an ongoing topic, and the rates of pay has helped out, but that also impacts our events. And then you mentioned the Miami Beach Convention Center, that whether we figure out if it's an extension of the mover or whatnot, we definitely need to improve how we get folks from the mainland to the Miami Beach side.
I remember a few years ago, Frankie calls me up, and this is a great problem to figure out. There was I think it was Bayfront Park, and there was a Super Bowl was going on, and Frankie, we had to accommodate these mega events. We are blessed as a community. Not many places have this problem where we have to, balance a world-class marathon with Super Bowl and now F1 and World Cup. But these are, so fundamental to our success, to elevating our brand, to driving economic impact, to getting our brand around the globe. And I'm going to give the last word to Angela as the overseer of the state. We've got about a minute, 2 minutes left. But what better way to close out than to once again let Angela give us a broad perspective and why it is so important that whether it's the private sector, the public sector, that we all continue to invest in sports because of the power of the message, not just the economic impact. The fact that it can bring communities together and has so many benefits beyond our borders. So, Angela, you've got the closing word. No pressure.
Look at that. Well, the thing about being the first is remaining first, right? And so when we did it, it was a great idea. Everyone thought it was awesome. Well, now we've had decades of where other states have been able to come in. If you look at Minnesota now has somewhat of a state committee, if you will, because they hosted a Super Bowl. Our founding came in the '96 FIFA hosting in Orlando. And that was one of the first major events that was supported out of the Florida Sports Foundation back in '96. But of course, the bid was announced many years before that. And so it was in preparation going in to support that event. Now we find ourselves, how do we now keep up with Texas and their program, or Georgia via Atlanta, Louisiana for what they're going to do for New Orleans? Because not many other states can host back-to-back Super Bowls. But what does that mean for the resources? Our partners like Matt and the others throughout the state, the events that are coming in, they're coming in like the dam has opened up, right? And the water is just gushing in. And with that, that's great. But from a support perspective and from Florida Sports Foundation, we now are charged to be able to keep up with that support to match the events that are coming in. No other state, we could host 3 back-to-back Super Bowls. Georgia's not doing that. Louisiana's not doing that. Texas really isn't doing that. I mean, they host many of the events that we host, and we can take a look at that. But as it relates to our program, and then speaking to the supporters and selling the message that while this is Florida, it's where the world comes to vacation. We can do everything year round, all of that. But how do we then continue to maintain being pioneers, if you will, in the space, and always looking at what's next and maintaining the partnership?
So just to close out, it's always a competition. We have big targets on our back because in many cases we are number one. And we're not only competing on the field, but it sounds like we're competing in the boardroom. But we are blessed to have an amazing team here, and there are many others. So let's give them a round of applause as we close out the session. And of course, thank you and thank our World Strategic Forum for having us.